Right. I'm just, this is cool. I've never done it like this before.
Yeah, this is usually a first for most people. I do it this way. I record Clubhouse rooms so that those who don't have iPhones can still be part of the conversation when they listen to the recording after.
Brilliant.
All right.
Okay,
So
perfect.
yeah, so just tell us a little bit about what you do, like what's your business, who do you serve, and all of that.
Okay, well, thank you for having me here, first of all. And also, my name's Jade Matthews. I'm an online fitness and strength coach for professional women and entrepreneurs and well, high achieving, ambitious women who want to look good in their clothes and look good naked. Are you still picking me up, by the way?
Okay, now.
I'm just checking.
Yeah, go on now. Go on.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can't hear you.
No, can you hear me
So
if you connect it to your phone? On your phone.
Okay, sorry guys, I'm just double checking that's actually picking up. Okay, so I've been online for just over a year now. Previous to that, I was working in a gym. I already had my online set up just before COVID hit, and we went into our first lockdown back in March 2020. But I was luckily very, very grateful that I am blessed that I was already online. And yeah, it's just been fun and games since then, basically. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Okay, awesome. So I'm just going to get right into it because this is a topic that I really enjoy talking about. Freelancers generating leads through networking. It sounds insane when people hear it for the first time because it's freelancing, and the first thing people are thinking of is that the only way to generate leads is cold messaging, basically just being a creep in people's inboxes and spamming them and asking them, oh, do you want to work with me? This is what I do, blah 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 blah, and all of that. But I found that networking is a better way to generate leads because it's what I've been doing for the past 2 years. In fact, I have sworn to never send a cold message again, to just use my network and lean on my network when I need work. And it's worked for me. So Jade, I'm going to start off with mistakes that you think, or rather mistakes you've seen freelancers make when they are trying to build their network, grow their network, or generate leads. What mistake have you seen in all of that?
I see them. The most common mistake I see is when people send a really, really long first message. And this is when it doesn't even have to be a pitch sometimes. Sometimes it might be something else. It's not always a pitch, but it's so long. And it's literally like, I don't think anyone these days wants to kind of just sit there and read basically a novel that you've just sent them in the inbox. And it's kind of really off-putting because you think to yourself, no, this is just like, no. And what I tend to do is when I used to get those messages, I just scrolled all the way. Like I'll be honest, I'll just scroll down to the bottom just to see kind of what they want, really, because the bit in the middle is usually just like fluff and just them talking about nothing. So that's the mistake I see a lot of people make. And it's kind of already made me lose interest in them because I'm like, well, sorry. I mean, I'm not someone, I don't want to sound rude in terms of when someone says they don't have time for something, but that's really off-putting because people don't want to sit there and read a novel in their inbox, whether it's on LinkedIn or any other social media platform.
yeah, that's true. Some of the mistakes I've seen people made, and I made a list so that I don't forget anyone. Number one, being a creep. Like, you get people who are just trying to connect with you, and the first thing they are saying is they're basically just making a very, very inappropriate they are basically just being complete creeps, and they just, some of them start with inappropriate messages that you don't want to be listening to. Some of them are asking to meet in person or to have coffee when you've never spoken to them before. Like, who does that? Some of them are asking you for personal details, like it's their right to know stuff about your life the first time. It's just all of this creepy stuff that people are doing. Like you said, some are sending really long messages. um you have people who don't even do the tiniest bit of research before they even reach out to somebody. Like, I feel like if you're going to reach out to someone to even start any sort of conversation, you should at least know the basics about them so that the conversation is personalized in one way or the other. And then you have those that even go as far as spamming you with links, and they be like, okay, I just put up this content on LinkedIn, I think you should check it out, or I just created this blog post, I think you should check it out. It's all just so creepy, and I nobody's going to respond to that, and yet they are still doing it, which just makes absolutely zero sense. So now that we've covered all those mistakes, what do you think, like before we even start talking about building relationships, what do you think are the basics that freelancers should have when they're just starting out? What is that thing that you have first before you say, okay, now I can start building relationships?
I think they should just start with a more casual approach and actually more relaxed. I know that sounds, I know how it feels, because in the early stages of my business, I was a little bit like, I don't want to be in someone's DMs, don't want to be cold pitching, whatever. But I just feel that they should maybe make it more conversational instead of just like, here's my pitch, I hope it's okay. Like, just start a conversation, just like you and I just started on this, like, hi, how are you, how's your day been? Like something really, really simple, or just saying something like, how are you, is actually really powerful, because people just don't ask that question to a lot of people anymore, because they just assume everybody's okay. But just sending someone links is just the first thing I've noticed, especially getting links in my inbox. I'm kind of like, I don't want to look at it. Like, the fact that you've just sent it there and plonked it down without me asking for it just makes me not want to look at it. So the only way to really get started is to start a genuine conversation and then go from there. Because it usually, after the start of a genuine conversation, it usually goes to, so what do you do? So it's actually really easy just to get onto that topic. And then it's not awkward. Nobody's pitching, nobody's sending long paragraphs. And,
Yes.
everybody's happy, should we say?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like the first thing you should be doing when you're just starting out as a freelancer, before you even start reaching out to people to ask them to connect with you or to do anything at all, you need to have a website. You need to have something that, okay, if I'm trying to research you a little bit to decide, okay, is this person worth talking to, then I want to look at your website, I want to look at your profile, I want to make sure that this is not like some weirdo, this is someone that I can actually have a conversation with. So that's like the first thing you need to do. Make sure you're properly set up on social media, make sure you're properly set up on your website, so that when people are trying to like research you, there's actually something to look at. This is something that is so underrated. People just want to build relationship, they want to become authority immediately, but they're not doing any of the hard work. They think it's just going to happen in one day, and that never does. That never happens without any of all that groundwork. So this is what I think you should do. You need to lay the groundwork with your website, you need to lay the groundwork with social media, then you need to start thinking about your personal brand, because the people I've had conversations with on social media are people that I feel like I can, like we're talking now, people I feel like I can relate to, people I feel like I can connect with. If I can't do that with you, then we can have a conversation. And how do I know that you're someone I can talk to? Because I've seen your content, because you are creating content on social media. You are not just creating content, you're also engaging. In fact, I think that you should spend more time engaging with people's content than even creating your own content, because these are the people you're trying to impress. Obviously, you're trying to make an impression on them, and that can only happen when you put yourself in their spotlight. And the most organic way, natural way to do that is to start engaging with their content. LinkedIn, Twitter, wherever you think that they're active, start engaging with them there. If they post something, don't just be a yes man and say yes man, yes sir, agree, disagree. You actually want to have an opinion. It doesn't even matter if it's something against what they are saying. In fact, those are the kind of people even pay attention to. Those that have a differing opinion, those are the people that they are listening to. So you always want to be going in there and saying something engaging, something worthwhile, that they're going to stop scrolling and look and say, oh, who's this person? And then they're clicking on your profile to look at your name. Sometimes they're even the one starting the conversation, not you doing it. Yeah. I also think that you need to be creating content to impress the person that you're planning to reach out to. See, networking, in my opinion, is like a long game. It's not something that just happens today. You can't just connect with somebody and then start reaching out to them. It seems salesy. So when I connect with somebody that I want to get to know better later on, then I start to create content. In my field, that's SEO. depends on what you're niching in freelancing. You start to create content for that audience, and then you do it regularly and they take note of you. But the key word is consistently creating content, consistently engaging with their content, showing up every time on their news feed, so that when you reach out into their inbox or you reach out to them via Twitter, wherever, then it seems organic. I feel like Twitter is even the best place for this kind of thing, because I've realized that most of the people that I want to impress are on Twitter, and there's kind of like less competition for their attention there than on LinkedIn, where you have like 200, 300 people dropping comments, and it's so easy to get lost in the conversation. But on Twitter, it's easy to get their attention. Now, which brings me to my next question. How do you get the attention of somebody that you're trying to impress?
I think you made a valid point about the interacting on people's content, not just making content for your ideal client, but also interacting on you said something about put them in the spotlight, put yourself in the spotlight, like being an authority. And I think what you mentioned about some people think being an authority is putting those long posts in people's DMs with a link like, oh, look at me, when actually it could just be something as simple as like interacting on their content and giving your opinion and showing that you have an opinion as well, even if it's different to what you're commenting on as well.
Yeah, agree. But what I'm asking now is that how do you get people to notice you? Someone you're trying to impress, someone you want to start a conversation with later on. What do you do to get them to notice you? Like, you've tried all this stuff, you've created content, you're engaging with them, they're not still biting. Like, what else can you do to get them to take notice of you?
I usually, if they interact on my content, then I speak to them personally in PMs, and I just drop something in like, oh, thanks for interacting, I appreciate you, and something like that. If I'm interacting on their content, I think this is something some people might find a bit difficult to do. I found this really difficult in the early stages of my business. And obviously it makes people a little bit uncomfortable sometimes, but also if they're posting something, they might post something that you genuinely disagree with or that you have a different opinion on. And I think some people, especially in the early stages, they're like, I just want to agree with this person, because obviously when you're trying to impress someone, you want them to like you want them to like see you and hear you and whatnot. And as humans, we just want to be liked and accepted. So we agree with whatever they're saying. But I find that especially now, if I see something on LinkedIn and I disagree with it, I let rip. Not let rip, but I let loose, and I'm like, no, I'm sorry, this is rubbish, and I personally don't agree with it, and that's fine. Other people hold different opinions, but that's okay though. It's okay to be different. It's okay to hold different opinions, regardless of if they fit your client avatar or not. You still might hold a different opinion to them, and that's okay.
Yeah, definitely agree with you there. In fact, I think I was saying that it's those controversial statements that you make that do not agree with everybody else that people actually pay attention to. When everybody is being yes sir, agreed, and then you have one person with a completely different opinion, everybody's going to stop and be like, okay, what's this person saying? Do you have the facts to back up your argument? And then for sure they're going to take notice of what you're saying. I'm a big fan of communities, but I think a lot of people, especially those who are just starting out in freelancing, tend to get lost in communities, Facebook Slack communities. Do you have any tips on choosing the places that you engage with as a freelancer? Like, where do you spend your time?
I spend my time actually a lot of it on Facebook groups, but this can be a challenge in itself, because Facebook groups are kind of, they can work a bunch, but they can also, like you mentioned, people can get lost, because some of the groups are literally just vanity metrics where there's loads of people in them, but no one actually interacts, or like about 5 people interact. And there are groups where there might be a very, very small community, but everyone interacts. So it's literally about finding the right group, depending on what that person's avatar is. It is a lot of trial and error. And I think that's the case in a lot of businesses anyway, whether they're freelance or whatever their background is. I think it's about finding the right place to network for what you're doing, like for that branch of work that they're doing. However, just to not get lost in the noise, because there is a lot of noise out there. And, you know, people always say to me, oh, you're in such a competitive industry. And I always think to myself, isn't every industry now pretty much competitive? Like, if you think about it, you know, whatever industry you pick, it's competitive. That's just the way the cookie crumbles, you know, especially on Facebook, where the Facebook groups are saturated, they are full, but there are some gold mines in there where if you find them and they work for you, they're brilliant. You know what I'm saying? They're absolutely amazing. But it's about finding the ones that are amazing. This took me years. Well, I say years, this took me ages. And sometimes even still now, I find myself in that group where it's a bit like you're talking to a void, and I'm like, no, I don't like this group. And then you just move on. You know, it is trial and error, but that's business, unfortunately. You know, it is about, you know, you do have to fail a lot first.
I have to agree with you, especially when you talked about vanity metrics. I think this is something that almost every new freelancer that you know tends to get swallowed up in. You start posting on social media and you become obsessed with how many likes, how many people are commenting on your stuff, and then you stop focusing on the things that are actually important. Who is reaching out to you privately to ask about your services? Who is reaching out to continue the conversation? And instead, you are focused and you go to sleep, and the first thing you think of in the morning is, okay, how many likes and comments do I have? So it's so easy to get swallowed up in all of that, or to even make that big, massive mistake of joining those what do they call them again? Pods, I think, engagement pods, where everybody comments on their stuff and nothing is really happening. It's just empty. So that's a really good point. Now, I think part of the best ways to optimize your time as a freelancer is to niche it down quickly and then start to figure out who should I be connecting with in this niche, who should I be talking with in this niche. What is your best tips for freelancers who are undecided about picking a niche?
This is interesting because niching can be a double-edged sword, I find, because you can niche down and it can be great because you're providing something for a very small amount of people, but sometimes you can niche down where you're niching yourself out of the market, if that makes sense, where you're kind of like, you've literally not even got a handful of people who you're niching to. I find with niching, again, especially when I was trying to find my niche to work with, oh my God, I changed it like 3-4 times. I'm not joking with you. It is annoying. But what I found is, instead of just changing it all the time to see where people are at, it kind of is like picking one and then seeing how you can refine it. Because, for example, I work with professional ladies and women and entrepreneurs and business owners. However, I wasn't at that place before. I was kind of like, oh, I'm just going to pick like women, professional women. And then I thought, oh, that's a bit vague, because that can literally be anyone. But I didn't find that until I started producing content, getting clients in. And then it made me realize, and speaking to people on telephone calls and on what they called, on like breakthrough sessions that I offer, that's when I started realizing kind of like, where's the part where I can put my niche in. So what are their problems that I can fill in? Because at first I was like imagining all these problems for these women, and I hadn't even spoken to anyone yet. So a lot of niching comes down to, you have to get out there and you actually have to speak to people to see what their problem areas are, in order to actually then be able to produce a content or programs or whatever it is that you're offering, the service, to suit their needs and to solve their problem, basically. Because you ultimately, if you're solving a problem for them, you need to know what the problem is, and it needs to come from a lot of people, not just one or two. It needs to be several people saying, this is my problem and this is why I can't get to my goal of X, and then it kind of goes from there. It is a bit annoying. Maybe I haven't said it the way a lot of people, because a lot of people, when you ask them about niche, they're like, yeah, make it really, really like significant and really, really specific. And that's great. But I find that I tried to make it specific in my wording, but actually I got the best out of my niche when I actually started talking to people and getting to know what their problems were, instead of, this is my imaginary problem that I've created for these women. I'm just going to try and create something for their imaginary problems, which actually didn't really exist anyway. So again, trial and error. I hope that's answered your question.
I definitely agree with you there, because when I was starting out, I remember that I had the bio of website copywriter, then I had the bio of storyteller, then I had the bio of conversion copywriter, then I had the bio of landing page copywriter. I changed mine like 10 times at least. Like I was changing it every month in the first year. It wasn't until
Mhm.
last year, I think August, yeah, oh no, 2 years, yeah, last year April, that I finally figured out what I wanted to do. And what happened was that I was having all these, will I say, wrong conversations with the wrong people, because I was not
Mhm.
serving the right audience. So I would go into people's inboxes and try to start conversation with people who did not need what I was offering. So basically, I was wasting my time. But the moment I figured out the problems I wanted to solve, the moment I figured out that this is what I want to do, this is how I'm going to do it, and then I started creating content around that, it became so easy to network, because I was suddenly an authority. And when they would reach out and ask questions, I could easily provide those answers. When they would ask about how I could fix their problems, I could provide those answers, because one, this was my niche. So I was attracting the right people. Two, I was talking authoritatively about the problems that they were facing. Three, it attracted the right people to me. So conversations was easier, the flow was better, and I was not wasting my time having meaningless conversations. So definitely, I think there's too much pressure on freelancers these days to figure it out immediately. Like, who does that? You're going to try, you're going to fail, you're going to make a lot of mistakes, but ultimately you will find your niche. Just don't try to rush it and then pick one thing and feel like you have to die there, or this is I will do it until I can't do it anymore. If you see something is not working for you, then you completely free to try something else. Don't just stay in one place and stick to it. If you see that it's not working, then figure out a problem you want to solve and move there. So that's very, 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 very important. Now, the next thing I wanted to ask, which I think is very, very tricky, what is, like, you go into somebody's inbox that you're interested in impressing, how do you start that conversation without coming off as some creep or someone who says see?
I start it off with, how's your week going? Hey, great to connect. How's it going? I literally keep it very, very simple. I went down the road of, like you said about you're going to get it wrong, where you mentioned the freelancers are going to get it wrong. I got it so wrong, like literally only a couple of like months ago as well. I was still getting it wrong because I was saying, I tried to keep this paragraph really short about who I am, what I do, this is why I'm talking to you. And then in the end, people just ignore it because they don't really know what to come back with it. And I found that as well, when I get those long messages in my inbox, I'm like, I don't really know what to say to this. So it's not so much people are ignoring you because they're horrible. It's just they don't know how to come back to it. Whereas if you just say, hey, great to connect, how's it going? It's very, very colloquial. It's very straightforward. It's not, yeah, you still are going to get people who don't respond to you, and that's just life. But the pressure's not there. No one's selling anything. No one's being sleazy. Well, I don't think that it's sleazy, but yeah, each to their own. People will still find that annoying, and because I've seen some people on LinkedIn on posts say that, actually write content about this and say, I don't like it when people are in my inbox asking me, hey, how am I? I don't really have time to respond to it. This is what somebody else said on their LinkedIn posts. And that's just a prime example of someone who doesn't like that. But if I had to go with a majority, I'd say the majority don't like the long paragraph. So just start it off really straightforward and simple with just the, hey, how's it going? How's your week going? Great to connect. Nice to meet you. Sometimes I wouldn't suggest saying this unless you felt aligned with it, but sometimes I say, just popping in to say hi. I don't really like passive connections, because that's what a lot of people do. They network, they make all these connections on LinkedIn, and then they never talk with them. And it's like, well, what's the point if you're not going to talk with someone? It's just, again, it's some people who just do it for the vanity metrics of, they just want just to be seen, like having loads of connections on LinkedIn, but are you actually talking to them?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. There's something I as a rule of thumb, before I go into somebody's inbox to even talk to them, I never tell them I do SEO, I do this, I do that. I never even talk about my services as a rule of thumb. If I'm reaching out to
Mhm.
somebody, it's because I've seen something that they posted and I liked, and I'm commenting on what they posted as a follow up. I read a blog post that they wrote and I really enjoyed it. So I'm telling them that, oh, I read this blog post that you wrote. I really enjoyed it. They published something on social media that maybe it was controversial, maybe it made me laugh. I'm going to go in there and say, oh, your last post was so funny. I enjoyed it. It's always easier to take the personal roots based on something they've said than leading in there and saying something weird. Because we're in a pandemic. If you ask anybody how are you, just assume they're not fine. We're in a pandemic. Nobody is fine. Everybody is having a shitty day every day. So that same question of how are you doing, I hope you're fine, ain't nobody fine in the pandemic. So it's just easier for me personally when I'm coming to them and I am talking from something that they've done, something that makes them feel good, something that makes it easier to just snap, get into the conversation. And before you know it, we've talked for 15 minutes. We feel like we're friends. And then I just end it there. I still do not even say anything about what I do. I never ever do that because I don't want it to seem like the goal of me coming into your inbox to network is to ask for a sale or to tell you about what I do. I want it to feel like I just want to get to know you better as a person because we're
Mhm.
human beings at the end of the day. That's what people fail to understand. You want to connect with someone as a human being first, and then sometimes it may happen, sometimes it doesn't. Either way, it's cool. They reach out to you and they ask about what you do. Sometimes it ends in a podcast appearance, it ends in a speaking engagement, but it always leads somewhere most of the time. But that only happens when you are genuinely interested in connecting with them as humans, not as people that you are planning to sell to later on. So as a rule of thumb, like I said earlier, don't go in there telling them that this is what you do. Don't go in there saying I sell this or I sell that. Go in there just interested in knowing more about them, in getting to know them better, in maybe talking about what they've done, and then just leave. People are always very impressed when I do that because they're like, oh, I expected to be sold to. You didn't try to sell to me. You just talked to me, and that made me feel good. And it's just easier to start that way. And then later on, let them bring up the conversation of moving towards a working relationship. Now, there's something I think that freelancers should do that is very important because it translates from what you're posting on your blog on online, and then it translates into that networking part. Finding your voice, so important because you're a freelancer, your brand is personal, your voice is everything. Your voice will translate from the kind of post you're creating to the people that you are networking with. So what is your best tip for helping freelancers to find their voice? Because a lot of them give into the temptation to follow brand voices of people like Gary Vee and all those big influencers with 3 million followers rather than trying to find their own voice and doing stuff that works for them.
I think I would say for them is this is probably challenging for a lot of people is to be very, very aware if they're not already of what they stand for, what they don't stand for, and make it clear if they ever have to in content as well. Instead of, like you said, following people like Gary Vee, who like he has a very specific way. His brand is very like straightforward, very aggressive, very in your face, but not everybody is like that. Whereas they might look at Gary Vee and think, oh, he's successful, so I need to be like that. Whereas, of course, you don't, because that's who he is and you're going to be who you are. And if you're trying to be anything you're not, whether that's quieter or louder or more aggressive, it's not going to work because people are going to suss it out. So just identify what it is that you stand for, who you are, what kind of demographic you're working with, what you tolerate, what you don't tolerate, and don't be scared to share it because it might be scary at first because, like I mentioned before, as humans, we just want to be liked, we just want to be accepted. But you might end up finding that you're getting liked by the wrong people or people who you don't want to work with, people who are not your demographic. And then that just results in more confusion because you kind of think you've got a lead and then you don't have a lead. And then it's kind of like, oh, this person's like not my vibe. And the reason they're not your vibe is because you're not being honest with your vibe. And if you're not honest, then you're gonna get like flaky people. You're gonna get people who just don't connect with you on any level, whether that's spiritual or business or whatever. So be very, very clear on what you stand for. And what one of a good business coach of mine said that before, because I was struggling to kind of be real online because I was scared of, you know, people not liking me and backlash and stuff like that. But it's honestly, it's paramount. It's hard at first because nobody wants to be unpopular. So but it's
true.
important to stand in your ground and stand for what you believe in and what you know what you stand for in general.
Yeah, that's good advice. I think what works for me personally is, before you even start creating content online, you need to take time to study people who are successful. Not necessarily like the big them Gary V's and all of that. But when I say successful, people that tend to get consistent engagements on social media, what kind of content are they creating? What kind of content are people engaging with? And these are people in your niche. What works for them? Then reverse engineer it into your own voice, into something that makes you feel comfortable, not something that makes you feel like you're being somebody else, something that makes you feel comfortable, and share that. That is like a good way to start finding your voice. Because I remember when I started on social media, the first post I made, I talked about my struggles. I talked about how I used to write 5,000 words a day, and people really resonated with that, because many freelancers in developing countries have had a similar story, and I generated my first lead that way. Second post, I shared something that happened in my life. I'm always sharing personal stories. That's my own brand voice. I'm always inappropriate sometimes. That is my voice. That is what works for me, and people are drawn to that. But it's not going to work for everybody. So you need to find out what is working for people who are successful on social media, specifically your niche, and then how can you reverse engineer it for your audience to like you. One thing you can never go wrong with is being funny. I always tell people this: you can never go wrong with being funny. You can never go wrong with storytelling. You can never go wrong with failures. I think sharing those failures are even more important than success, because it makes you human. Everybody is always sharing good news. It's LinkedIn, it's Twitter, but sharing a failure or something that you failed at doing makes you feel more. Makes you seem more vulnerable. That's someone I can connect with on any day. That's someone I can feel like I can trust and I can open up to. So do that. It's hard, like you said, when you're just starting out, but the more you start creating content and you're not obsessing over metrics, the easier it's going to be for you to find your voice, own it, and then build around it. So that's like the last of my questions. If anybody has any questions, please just raise your hands and come up to the podium and ask your questions. But I'm just going to recap. Yeah, you're okay. So Arnold just asked if what is a good amount of time to spend engaging with people's content or reaching out to people privately. How long or how much time should you spend on networking? I'm going to let Jade answer that first of all before I chime in.
I would say this would depend on your specific goals, first of all, of how many clients you're aiming to sign up per month. And we'll start with that first, and then you can whittle it down to, you know, I'm going to spend, for example, I block my days out. So I'll block like 2 hours out in the morning, and then after my break, I'll come back and block another 2 hours out. And for each of those, like for half an hour, I'll be on outreach or responding to messages that I've had in my DMs, or and then half an hour of it will be like interacting with other people's content or in groups or stuff like that on Facebook. But it depends on how you work specifically. For me, I chop and change between things just to keep, because that's how my brain works. I literally go from like interacting to DMs to outreach to, and then I alternate again. Sometimes I lose track, I'm going to be honest with you. So make sure if you are someone like that, I've got a very active mind, it's constantly moving around. So I sometimes, in the early stages, I had to put a timer on my phone. So for like every 15 minutes or every half an hour. And then when it like went off, then I'd go on to my next task, which would be like, I don't know, interacting or then responding to people who voted on my poll or something like that, or people who were left messages on my post on Facebook the day before, like messaging them and or responding to their comments on my post as well. So I hope that's helped, Arnold.
Yeah. I'm going to add that when I was starting out, I was very aggressive, very, very aggressive. Like I used to schedule time for LinkedIn. I think that's something very important to do. Put that in your calendar. If you're going to do 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening, awesome. But I was probably doing like 3 hours a day on LinkedIn. In 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the afternoon, 1 hour in the evening, and it paid off because that was my primary lead gen machine, and I was determined to do it without sending cold messages, which meant that I had to spend more time engaging with with content of the people I was trying to impress. So what is your work schedule like? If you have time, I would advise you to spend more time on social media, but not just you need to be very, very like tactical about the time you're spending on social media. I use hashtags. I follow hashtags, content marketing, hashtag SEO content, hashtag content strategy. Like these are some really good hashtags to follow on LinkedIn. You can do the same thing on Twitter also. You want to make sure that the time you're spending is very, very quality. It is leading somewhere. You're not just spending your time just talking to people who don't matter. I know it's selfish, but this is the right thing to do. You're spending your time talking to the right people, like hiring managers. Who are you serving? For me, that's content marketers and people in charge of SEOs. So if I'm scrolling and I'm looking at content strategy hashtag, I'm only going to be commenting on the stuff of people that I'm trying to impress. That is what I do. I am very intentional about how I spend that time on social media. I am very intentional about who I'm engaging with. I am very intentional about where I am spending that time. So, for example, every Thursday there's SEO chat on Twitter. I spend that 1 hour in there because the people I'm trying to impress are in that chat. They are taking notes, they are watching, they are seeing, they are following. That's a great way to spend my time. Same thing on LinkedIn. There are some popular content marketers or marketers. If they post something, I always look out for it, and then I go in there and drop a comment if I have something to say, because fellow marketers who I'm trying to impress are engaging with their content. So it's not really about how many hours you're spending on LinkedIn or on networking. It is about the quality of the time that you're spending there. Because if you do it right, they know who you are. You reach out to them privately, you are going to have their attention. Is to identify what you do and for whom. So Arnold, what do you do and who do you do it for? Okay, right. If you don't know who you're trying to network with, that's like step one. Make sure you zeroed in on that personal brand, what you do and for whom, so that you're spending the right time with the right people. You have to be as selfish as possible to really get that juice out of all that time that you're spending on social media. Okay. What I think, anybody who is, for those who are going to be listening to this recording, for those who are just starting out as freelancers, this is like a checklist of things I think you should be doing when you're just trying to build your brand and you are determined to use networking as one of those ways for you to generate leads. First of all, lay the groundwork. That means building a website. That means establishing on social media, making sure that your profile is optimized so that when someone who is interested or curious about you wants to look you up further, they have something to look at, something that tells them what you do, something that really, really sells you as a professional, so that they know that if I'm going into this person's inbox to talk with them, there's going to be a positive outcome coming out of it. Now, two, spend more time engaging with people's content and less time creating content. Content creation is great, but you're just starting out, you're trying to impress people, you need to be where they are. That means identifying who is that ideal customer. For me, like I said, that's content, head of content divisions, people who work in SEO. So once I know who these people are, I'm aggressively connecting with them, and then I am engaging with their content. It's the same thing you need to do. Figure out who is your ideal audience and then engage with their content on Twitter, where it's really personal, and on LinkedIn, where not just them, but other people in that same field can see what you're doing. Okay. Now, you need to follow those people on Twitter. I think I just discovered Twitter in December, and I keep beating my head up because I realized that all these influencers that I want to impress, all these people I'm trying to work with, they're on Twitter and they're tweeting and they're so personal there. And it's easy for me to get their attention Unlike LinkedIn, where they post something and they'll have like 300 comments, and it's so easy for me to get lost in the comment section. But on Twitter, I can easily get their attention. So I want you to really take Twitter seriously. It might not seem like it might seem negative sometimes, but Twitter is really awesome for lead gen. And I figured out that the leads I generate on Twitter always pay well. Like, they pay really well, because these are the people that I'm trying to impress. It's like there's lower barriers to sale than if I was on a platform like LinkedIn, where I was competing with like so many different people. Now, next, join communities. But like Jade said, you have to be intentional about the communities that you're joining. It's bigger is not always better. In fact, it's so easy to get lost in those big communities. You want to join active communities where people are very helpful. For me as a copywriter, in fact, the moment where I decided to leave my in-house job and become a freelancer was when I joined TCC, and I saw people who I felt I was better than any more than me. So that was like very, very influential. You need to join communities where members are active, where they're always sharing information, stuff that can help you grow, because you don't have the funds to hire a coach or a mentor. Slack is also awesome. I tell you, Slack is incredible. If you are a woman and you are in tech or SEO, join the Women in Tech SEO community. There are so many communities out there that you can join. There are content marketing groups. Join those groups if you're a copywriter. Basically, figure out where your ideal buyer hangs out on Slack and join those groups and contribute to the conversation. I know it feels overwhelming, and you're so scared that if I say something, people are going to, oh, they're going to come for me because I'm not an authority. Say something anyway. Say something, get noticed. Because silence, nobody ever sees you when you're not talking. It is only those who are talking and are visible that people pay attention to. So you need to speak up. Next, on social media, please do not obsess over metrics. So easy to do, so easy to start obsessing over likes and comments, and you start to forget that the most important thing is where these things lead to, which is usually conversations. And I found out that the people who always hire me on LinkedIn, it's crazy. They don't even engage with my content most of the time. Like, the best clients I've had on LinkedIn do not engage with my content at all.
Yeah.
And yet they are the ones shouting and say, oh, I'm always seeing your stuff coming up. I'm like, who is this person? How you see my stuff if you've never engaged with me? But they see you. They see you. Keep creating that content, whether people are putting a like on it or dropping a comment on it. Trust me, you do it consistently, and then you show up on their feed regularly, and they will take notice of you. Join conversations on Twitter that matter to your audience. For me, that is chats like freelance chats, copywriting chats, SEO chats. What is your niche as a freelancer? Trust me, they're going to be having groups on Twitter. Join those conversations. The people who want to hire you are in those conversations, and that is the best place to impress them. What else? Funny is always better than being weird. You need to find your funny bone. It works for me. It works for everybody. This is a pandemic. People want to laugh. If you can give them, in fact, I've signed clients by telling a fat story, by telling a poop story, by telling stories about when I did not wear pants to Zoom meeting. I have signed amazing clients by telling the weirdest stories on LinkedIn and Twitter. I was on SEO chat last week, and then the first question I asked was that people should share the weirdest place that they've dropped a fat. And someone from a university saw it, reached out to me and said that I made her laugh, and she wants to work with me. Not because I'm an SEO expert or because I know writing, but because I made her laugh. So please find your funny bone. Also, incorporate storytelling. Like, if you can find a way to tie a story into a message, it is going to be better received and more engaging than if you're just communicating. There are too many educators, there are too many teachers out there. Tell stories. People listen to stories because it just grabs attention from that first line, and you just want to keep reading to find out how it ends. And then instead of just giving them a dull ending, you're connecting it with your message, and then they're like, oh, that's where it's going. And it's going to stay with the person for the rest of the day and even longer than if you're just gone in there and you're just trying to teach or to preach. Finally, find your voice. This is so important. Do not, under any circumstances, try to imitate somebody else on social media. You will lose. Again, you're going to lose. You can't be Gary Vee. You can't be any of all those people who have 3 million followers. You can only be yourself. So what do you like to talk about? Who are you? You need to be vulnerable. I tell you, that shit is hard, but it works. The more vulnerable and open you can be about your failures, the easier it's going to be for people to connect with you, to like you, and to feel like they know you as a person. This stuff works for me and it works for so many people. In fact, I remember that Chris Jordan shared a story about how she failed, lost her job, and all that. And that post has like 3 million views on LinkedIn right now. And trust me, she's generating leads from that. So the more vulnerable you can be and open you can be about stuff that has not worked for you, as much as stuff that has worked for you, the more easier it is for people to connect with you. Finally, share your wins, especially if you're a woman. I feel like women do not celebrate themselves enough. Like, we're always so in the background, but it's so important. Share every win. I'm always my own biggest cheerleader and fan. If a client I've written for is ranking for even one keyword, I'm going to share screenshots of it on social media. If I do anything at all, I'm going to share it on social media. I think people on Facebook are getting tired of me always posting something celebratory, but they're always celebrating me. It's so important because that visibility of your success makes it easier for people to trust you, because clients ultimately want to buy results. They're not going to pay you $1,000 for copy of anything if they don't even have like the semblance bit of, will I say, of an idea of what it's like to work with you. And they can only see that when you share results, the good, the bad, the ugly. It's all part of the story. It's what makes you human, and that is what people are trying to connect with. Okay, Jade, do you have any closing words for us before we log out of here?
Yes, you dropped some dimes right there, Chima. Seriously, that was absolutely epic. And I was just sitting here like, because you can see me, like I'm nodding away, but then I was like flashing my microphone, like, yes, that, oh my God. But what you said about being vulnerable and sharing wins and failures, that is a big one. And I was absolutely pooping my pants when I had to do that. Well, not had to do that, but I wanted to show my vulnerable side. And I did it a couple of weeks back, like where how I failed so much in like my first year of business is basically like one big failure, but it depends on how you see it. Like, is it a lesson, or, you know, are you going to use it to like never try anything again, or are you going to use it to grow and then implement and get better and better and better? And what you said about when the people who, I think you said something about the people who come towards you, like who approach you, are actually people who don't interact on your content. That was another major one. And I remember one of my first business coaches telling me that they were like, oh, you know what, the chances are is someone who doesn't usually interact. And actually the clients I have now, ironically, I look back at how I signed them and I'm kind of like, I didn't even know she was on my friends list, because they
Exactly.
are watching in the background. Like, seriously, they're
Yeah.
watching.
Yeah.
So if there's
Yeah.
anyone in this room who's getting disheartened because they're maybe posting content and it's not getting engagement, like, it is annoying at first, like, because naturally as a human we want that, you know, we want to seem popular and stuff like that. But trust me, likes don't mean anything. Likes do not, one of my business coaches once said to me, likes do not equate to sales. So do not ever be worried about that. There are people still reading it, there are still people consuming your content, and there's a strong chance that they're going to one day approach you and say something along the lines of, I've been reading your content for a couple of months and dot dot
Mm-hmm.
dot.
Mm-hmm.
Because,
Mm-hmm.
you know, they don't usually make themselves know. Even when you do a CTA at the end of your content, they might not necessarily, they don't want to be seen as, not everybody wants to comment and be seen as like, oh yeah, I want to take up that opportunity. Like, if I'm doing a call out for clients, if I'm doing a call out for like, oh, I'm looking for 5 women who want to drop 10 pounds, whatever, you know, not everybody wants to admit that they need help with that. So they'll be in the DMs instead of like responding to the comment, because they don't want to
Yes.
be seen as like asking for help, especially because I work with entrepreneurs, high achievers. They don't want to be seen as like that vulnerability. But yeah, that was very, very epic. You just nailed it, Chima.
Thank you. So we're going to end the room